Hello and welcome to another episode of Untold Chapters with Austin Macauley Publishers. Today's guest is John Walker Pattison, a proud South Shields native and one of UK's longest surviving cancer patients. After retiring from his senior cancer nursing role, John traded his stethoscope for a pen and now writes children's fiction inspired by adventures with his grandson Daniel. His incredible journey, shaped by his 1975 cancer diagnosis, is a testament to resilience and the power of hope. Passionate about family and living life to the fullest, John encourages us all to chase our dreams, study hard, play harder, and never forget that life is meant to be enjoyed. Thank you for coming on to an episode of Untold Chapters with us. Would you like to introduce yourself for our audience?
Yeah, thanks very much, Emily. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is John Walker Pattison. I am 67 years young and I am very privileged to live in South Shields, which is a small seaside town on the northeast coast of England. More importantly, I am very humbled to be one of the longest survivors of cancer in the United Kingdom today, coming up to almost 50 years since my diagnosis, despite the fact that in 1977, after years of failed chemotherapy and radiotherapy, my parents were told that I would not survive. But clearly, here I am today. Yeah, very, very young at the age, and by my own admission, having failed miserably at school, having much preferred to play the practical joker than study, I left school with a handful of worthless qualifications. As I say, I much prefer to play the practical joker. So in that respect, getting a diagnosis at the age of 18, I was very much a naive but also an immature young adolescent. So dealing with that certainly wasn't without its challenges.
I know that you, as you said, you were diagnosed as a teenager and given a rather grim prognosis. So how did you find the strength to keep going during a challenging time?
So I think in life everyone needs inspiration, regardless of what your situation is, whether it be a cancer diagnosis, heart disease, if you're just generally stressed, and let's face it, most of us in life are stressed today. So everyone needs inspiration. As a young adolescent, I discovered a band called Hawkwind who played a blend of space rock. They were my early inspirations, and I would travel the length and breadth of the country just to see Hawkwind play. They played a blend, as I say, of space rock, which was kind of not just the music I enjoyed, but it was the escapism I could identify in their lyrics. However, after having my first lot of chemotherapy in 1975, after my first relapse, I had to then face the challenge of knowing that it was going to be more difficult to try and get control of this cancer. And it wasn't until I started another round of chemotherapy that I received one day from an auntie in America a large package which included a lot of Indian memorabilia and a book called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. Now, I should say, Emily, that despite wasting my school years, I always had, from a very, very young age, an interest in the Native American Indians and their oppression and, being a people who were much maligned. So I always had that interest. And my Auntie Mary, who married an American GI after the Second World War, lived in North Carolina, actually still does. And she knew of my diagnosis through her correspondence with my mum. So she sent this package over, and when I opened it, as I say, the Indian memorabilia, but when I started to read Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, I just immediately found a new surge of inspiration. And throughout my challenges, the inspiration that came from that book, and particularly the Lakota Sioux Nation, was just unheralded. It was even more inspiration far beyond Hawkwind could provide me as well. So that fundamentally was my inspiration, the Lakota Sioux Nation. I probably read that book 5-6 times through the number of years that I was on and off treatment. And again, I mean, I still have an original copy, which, as I say, was sent from America, in my library today.
Oh, do you have it like framed just to sort of
No. It's just it's quite a tatty old book now, but it is there. Um, and throughout my cancer journey, throughout these failed treatments, um, I always promised myself that if I was fortunate enough to survive my cancer diagnosis, then I would visit Wounded Knee one day.
mm.
And to date, my wife and I have been and visited Wounded Knee on 4 or 5 occasions in South Dakota. And I still get a tingle down my spine when I walk through that graveyard and I can read the ancient headstones of some of the Native Americans who I'd read about in the book.
What more motivated you to write your memoir, and like how did you decide it was like the right time to share your story?
Well, I suppose I would bounce that back to you and say, is there ever a right time? For me, having retired from my cancer nurse specialist post a few years back, I thought, well, I was burdened with a number of chronic health conditions, each of those all as a consequence of the salubrious chemotherapy and radiotherapy I received almost 50 years ago. So when I retired, I felt I still had so much to give to the nursing profession. And the only way I could do that was to write my memoirs. And fundamentally and very, very importantly, the book is all about hope and inspiration for anyone in society, but more importantly, to anyone who's been touched by a cancer diagnosis, either themselves, their relatives, their loved ones, because sadly the statistics are scary. 1 in 2 of the population will get a cancer diagnosis at some point in their lives, and that's a real frightening statistic. And equally as sad, we also know that not everyone survives a cancer diagnosis. So the book is a 3-dimensional account of survivorship, and we'll come on to the second and third dimension, hopefully, duly. But it is fundamentally about offering hope and inspiration to anyone with a cancer diagnosis. And I'm equally proud to say that in the 2 years that it's been published, it's received 6 nominations for book awards. It won it was third in the New York Book Fair Awards, third in the London Book Fair Awards, and it won a Literary Titan 5-star Gold Award. That's an American company, their highest accolade. So very proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be as well, especially the fact that with the book in general, so anyone at any point in that journey, they have reference
Yeah,
with
I
the
guess.
book. Is that the word? Reference?
Absolutely, yeah.
How did your journey with cancer shape your views on, life, health, and resilience? And has it influenced your approach to, caring for your patients, when you were a cancer nurse specialist?
I think if you speak to any cancer patient, and clearly not just as a cancer patient, but also as a senior cancer nurse specialist during my working career, I spoke to many, many cancer patients. And I think almost, not everyone, but almost everyone would say to you that having a cancer diagnosis changed not just their outlook on life, but also their perspectives as well. And you learn to live each day as it comes because, life is very, very special. And I think we all have a responsibility to enjoy our lives. That said, I think, cancer is not without its challenges, not just financially and physically with the treatments, but also psychologically. I think if we neglect the psychological burden of a cancer diagnosis, then I would almost argue it's pointless giving physical treatment because that psychological burden of a cancer diagnosis is immense, and we need to manage that as well.
Oh, absolutely. And also because mental health is very, very important. And
Yeah,
it, especially nowadays, I think with everything happening, it's mental health is always
yeah,
you got to
definitely.
prioritize it.
And I think, the second part of your question, how it influenced my nursing care, I would like to think that I had more empathy. And again, I don't want to be disrespectful to any of my previous colleagues, but I think having had cancer, and many nurses have had cancer, survived, I think it just gives you more empathy with your patients. However, very importantly, I would never say to a patient, I know what you're going through, because quite simply, I don't. Despite the turmoil of my cancer pathway, everyone has a different experience, and it would be wrong of me to have said, I know what you're going through, because I don't. Now, just as important, if someone said to me, oh, I understand you've had a cancer diagnosis, how did you deal with this, that, or the other, then I would be more than happy to discuss my experiences if it helped them in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I can definitely understand, just with just going through it is one thing, but having someone there who, understands, it might, because I can completely understand that everyone's journey is going to be different, but
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
you've received the same information. And so it's sort of like, how did you sort of like your perspective, like how did you get through it? So yeah, I can definitely imagine that it was like a comfort to them probably.
I hope so. Yes, I hope so. And I do, just to add on to that, Emily. Although, as I say, I've got a number of chronic health issues, including another cancer, unfortunately, at this present time. I would go back to work tomorrow if I was able. I really do every single day. I do miss my nursing career.
Yeah, well, you know what they always say, if you find a job that you love and are passionate to do, then it's never really a job, really.
Well, that's right. That's right. I mean, I used to look forward to going into work every day. But, there you go. Life moves on.
Unfortunately, it does, and sometimes a bit too quickly.
Yes, absolutely.
Your book is described as being brutally honest. So, were there any parts of your journey that were, particularly challenging to write about, and how did you approach the writing process? Like, was it more like cathartic for you, or like more, emotionally taxing to relive those experiences again?
Yeah, it was all of those things, to be honest. Cathartic, I thought it would be. The intention when I set out writing the book was that I would relive my experiences as a survivor. Again, as I say, the fundamental aim was to offer hope and inspiration to anyone else. However, as I start writing and I remembered certain aspects of my cancer pathway, I would get up in the middle of the night and make notes and then write them up the following day. I was fortunate that at the time I was still working in the NHS, so I was able to get permission to look at my medical records, just so that I got the chronological order of all of the treatments that I received, and also the comments from some of the consultants about how I was being managed, and that was important to get those accurate. Calling the book a brutally honest account because, again, and I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone having treatment the present day, the treatment back in the 70s was exactly that. It was brutal. There was no relief from the nausea and vomiting. And I think today one of the most feared consequences of modern day chemotherapy is nausea and vomiting. But I'm pleased to say that for the vast majority, it's not a problem. We have such wonderful drugs that can control that these days that it really isn't the problem that it once was. But that was one of the biggest challenges way back then. Not least was also the psychological burden, being a loner, and as I said, being a naive, immature adolescent. The amount of times I really have no shame in admitting the times I contemplated suicide really left me with many, many demons in the back of my mind. So the idea was that the book would be cathartic. I have to be honest and say that there are still one or two demons lying in the canyons of my mind, at this present day. I think, going on to your question again, the hardest part was relaying the story of my daughter, Donna. So because of the consequences of the treatment that I received, I could not have a family of my own. And I guess just, casting my mind back in the 70s, that's not something that was discussed with the patients. So you were left infertile, but you were never told that that was going to be a consequence of the treatments. So that was a difficult thing to deal with. But eventually, after a number of years, my first wife and I fostered a young girl at the age of 2 called Donna, and then eventually went on to adopt Donna. Unfortunately, at the age of 4-year-old, Donna was diagnosed with terminal leukemia. So that was the biggest challenge of the book, to relive those tormented days and to look at that. However, I should hasten to add that when Donna started her chemotherapy, as I say, at the age of 4, that was in the March 1985, she had 5 months of chemotherapy. And if I could have sat there and taken that chemotherapy on behalf of Donna, I would have done, despite knowing how difficult it was for me. And it was really a feeling of helplessness watching Donna go through that treatment. But I guess in many respects, I think Donna was the one that supported both myself and her mum during that really difficult time. Unfortunately, in the August of 85, Donna was getting weaker and weaker and starting to lose weight, until eventually she was readmitted to the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle, where the consultant, Professor Alan Kraft, did some tests, the bone marrow test and a lumbar puncture. And then a few days later, called us into his office and basically said that this was a terminal situation. The cancer had changed. And when I said to him, what are the treatments? And he basically said to me, there are no treatments. Donna stayed in hospital for about 5 weeks, having blood transfusions and platelet infusions, till eventually she was, although still extremely poorly, she was well enough to come home and spend time at home. We would run back and forwards to the Royal Victoria Infirmary for further assessment for blood and platelets, until eventually, some 14, 15 weeks later, the visits to the RVI were getting less and less. And we went in one day to see Alan Kraft, and sat with him was an eminent hematologist. And he smiled at Donna, smiled at us, and just said, we've looked at Donna's bloods and we can't explain that she's gone into a spontaneous remission, which was absolutely, after my experience, was just absolutely incredible, because my parents had been told exactly the same about myself back in 1977. So, that was worth more than any lottery win could ever bestow upon any family. So we went home, and Donna got stronger and stronger. She'd always wanted to be a swimmer, despite the fact she had epilepsy as well. But she went on to learn to swim, became very proficient. She eventually swam for England, and also went on to represent Great British GB team in the World Swimming Championships in New Zealand in 1996, coming home with 2 silver medals, making me the proudest dad in the world.
I bet that was one hell of a Christmas present or birthday present,
Yes.
depending on the time of the year.
Yeah. So that was the hardest part, writing about that. And in many respects, Emily, I am a big believer in fate. I think things happen for a reason in life. So, I only have to console myself that Donna was placed with, myself and my first wife for a reason. And, I'm just pleased at the way things turned out. And Donna's doing very well today.
I'm glad to hear it. And by the sounds of it, the strongest woman I've heard of so far.
Yes.
Thanks for Donna for going through all of that and keep fighting through and doing what she has with her life so far.
Yes, absolutely.
As you were writing the book, what was the most surprising thing that like you learned about yourself as you were, going through that process?
Um, yeah, conformity. I think I realised that as all my young friends were getting married, engaged, I could count on one hand the amount of girlfriends I'd had because clearly cancer had taken hold of my life in a deathly stranglehold and had manipulated my life, but it also controlled my life as well. And I wasn't able to get out and do the things that young adolescents do. When I was writing the book, realizing that I hadn't been able to conform to what society expects of young teenagers, but also looking back, I kind of, and I take full responsibility for it, but I kind of almost jumped into a marriage with my first wife and realizing how unhappy that marriage was throughout the years. And I guess I never really knew who John Walker Pattison was during those days, those many, many dark days when suicidal thoughts were a constant reminder that I was living with a cancer diagnosis. And then eventually, obviously, the joys of Donna beating a cancer diagnosis as well. So it wasn't really till I got divorced, went into nursing, and met my second wife, my soulmate. And I know everyone says I'm married to their soulmate, but June is my best friend, my soulmate, the one who tops up my glass on a regular basis. And it wasn't until then that I realised really who John Walker Pattison was, who had always been just hidden really beneath a veil of negativity throughout my life. But thankfully, I was able to bring my head above the parapet and start to enjoy life in later years.
And discovering things that you enjoyed, what you were passionate for, and
Yeah, and one of those things was obviously still reading about the Lakota Sioux Nation, and in 2018, I wrote to the Tribal Council of Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota and told them about my story, and they invited me over to South Dakota to the reservation. So in 2018, I went over and spent a week on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation with the indigenous people of the Sioux Nation, the people who had unknowingly supported me through life's greatest challenge, my cancer diagnosis. And that was a real honour to be able to do that.
for anyone who may be going through their own cancer diagnosis, do you have any advice on, or even like supporting a loved one through that journey of their own? Do you have any advice for them?
Oh, I most certainly do. Read Me and My Shadow, Memoirs of a Cancer Survivor. So, joking aside, there is no magic formula. But I think, the key word there that you've touched on, Emily, is loved ones. And I think, there is nothing as important as family. And I think you always need the support of your loved ones. As I said earlier on, sadly, we know that not everyone survives their cancer diagnosis. But you've got to embrace life. I know that's not always easy to do when you're undergoing treatment, and it's not meant to sound flippant at all, but family are the most important thing. Some people don't have family, of course, so friends and relatives, extended family, loved ones are so important. They give you so much support.
Yeah, especially just a support system in general.
I guess the one thing I always used to say to families, whether it was a husband, a wife, a brother, a sister, a son, or a daughter, of those people who had been diagnosed, obviously during my time as a cancer nurse specialist, was to realise that not everyone wants or needs the same information. And very often there can be conflict in a family because one member of the family, whether it be the cancer patient or the nearest and dearest, might want to know everything about that cancer and the treatment. But the other person might just say, look, let's just get on and let's not ask too many questions. So I think because we all have different information needs, it's important that individuals realise that and respect everybody else's information needs, because, as I say, that can cause quite big conflict in families. But importantly, love, support, families are so important.
So for me and my shadow, if you could sum up the core message in one sentence, what would it be?
Oh, I think can I just say first of all that it is a book of hope and inspiration. It sounds as though it's really dark and negative, but there are lots of humorous anecdotes in the book as well, and that's important to say. But what I would say to people is, don't look back on your life unless you can be reflective. But equally as important, don't look forward unless you can dream. We all need dreams. We all need hope. Life is not a rehearsal. It's a short entity in the greater scheme of things. It's there to be enjoyed. And as I say again, I know that's not easy or meant to be flippant, because life can be very difficult when we're undergoing treatment for any kind of illness. But it's there to be enjoyed. It's our responsibility to enjoy. And again, I'll just have to reaffirm that there is nothing as important as family.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Untold Chapters, and thank you for all the advice that you've given anyone currently going through maybe their own journey, or or supporting one of their loved ones. And hopefully this will help with that, and always show them that despite the fact that it can be quite bleak, but as they say, it's always darkest before the dawn.
Absolutely, I hope so, yes. Well, thank you very kindly, Emily. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Untold Chapters. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, please follow and review.